Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Hey, what's up, and welcome to Q&A, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into, so let's just jump into it. We're going to start with the first question, which is from Sawtorn2, who says this: am I wacko for Joe Flacco? Look, I have maintained throughout the entire offseason that there was really going to be no solution at quarterback for this year that was going to leave me in a place where I would be overwhelmingly excited. Like, this was just going to be a natural drop off of where we hope the Browns to be at the quarterback position over the last few years, right? We've been spending pretty much since 2018. Think about that. Hoping that either Baker Mayfield or Deshaun Watson would turn into an elite quarterback, and legitimate hope that that could happen, right? That this would finally be the year. We are now at a place to where the expectations for the quarterback aren't going to be that high. Now, to some people, this is very disappointing, and I understand why it's very disappointing. For me personally, I think it's a bit freeing or liberating to be away from the expectations of hoping your quarterback makes some kind of crazy leap. We'll see what happens in the draft. They can blow this in the draft. But yeah, that's the thing that I am, I guess, looking forward to, is that this season's going to have a lot less pressure on it than other seasons have had. Like, other seasons felt like everything was on the line all the time. This one feels like it's going to be a bit more of a reset. And that being the case, you know, again, they're not tanking. I think they're going to try to win as many games as possible, but it's going to be a reset, right? They're not trying to maximize a championship window. They don't have it right now. And that means that we're a bit more free to enjoy this season. And hopefully they give us something we can enjoy. Like, if the Browns went and won 9 games last year, that was a completely unenjoyable prospect. But if they win 9 games this year or 10 games this year, we can actually enjoy it because we're not burdened by, like, the hope of the quarterback becoming an all-pro, or, you know, the hope that this team can get to a conference championship game. We're kind of just in a position to enjoy whatever the Browns can offer us, and hopefully they offer us something intriguing and encouraging throughout this year. You know, we could be happy if we get some progress with the number 2 overall pick and some young guys, and Miles has a good year and all of these other things. Like, the barrier for what we can consider a success this year is just lower. And I think that takes a lot of pressure off of a fan base that, quite frankly, has been dealing with a ton of pressure for like the last 8 years. So I think that's the thing that I'm most excited about. It doesn't really have to do exclusively with Joe Flacco, but it is related to it because his presence here kind of indicates that. Evan says, I think most people are asking for some form of this, and I would love to see the comps on Flacco and Will Howard. Obviously, the size is an easy one, but a breakdown or comparison of what that would create for an offensive perspective and draft perspective. Could the Browns use that as an opportunity to go after somebody like Josh Connolly at 33 instead of Milroe? I would not compare Will Howard to Joe Flacco at all. Joe Flacco, like, is known for incredible arm talent since he came out the draft in like 2008. Joe Flacco had a cannon for an arm. That is the exact opposite of what Will Howard brings to the table. He doesn't have a cannon, right? Like, I would say Will Howard is closer to like Andy Dalton than Joe Flacco coming out. And Joe Flacco, he's more of an arm strength guy. So would not really say that those two comp well at all. I don't see them as similar other than they're big and play quarterback. There's really no other resemblance there of their games. Ryan says, hey, Q, if we draft Travis Hunter and he's going to play mostly wide receiver, doesn't it make sense not to trade Greg Newsome? We have 4 CBs. If you include Mitchell, 5. Rotation, keep fresh, and Travis doesn't have to play too many defensive snaps. I think you can make that happen with or without Greg Newsome on the roster, because what you would be replacing Greg Newsome with isn't Travis Hunter. It would be Cam Mitchell, and then you could still work Travis Hunter in there as a 4th DB. And I think no matter where or no matter who's on the roster, that's where Travis is going to fit in. So either Cam Mitchell gets Greg Newsome snaps or Travis Hunter gets Cam Mitchell snaps and you keep Greg Newsome. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think keeping Greg really changes what you're going to do with Travis. He's always going to be the 4th cornerback or the 5th cornerback, somebody who comes in dime and nickel packages when you want to have extra DBs on the field, and not necessarily somebody who's going to be rotationally out there at 1, 2, and 3. You feel me? Like, that's not how I think Travis is going to be used. So I just don't think it matters if you keep Greg Newsome or not, or how many snaps you're going to play Travis, because Cam Mitchell is the replacement for Greg Newsome, not Travis. So that doesn't really change where Travis's snap count's going to be, if that makes sense. JSW says, Flacco under center, I feel more comfortable with Milroe learning behind him. Do you think Milroe is more teachable than Sanders? I think they're two different projects. And I do think Sanders, in his way, is a project. Sanders is going to have to change how he plays a bit, change what his habits are in order to be successful in the NFL, which is tough. Jalen Milroe is going to have to add to what he has, right? He's going to have to be more consistent with his base. I don't think Joe Flacco is there to teach anybody how to play quarterback, and I don't think that's what they're expecting Joe Flacco to do. I think that's the job of Bill Musgrave and, Tommy Rees and Kevin Stefanski. So I don't know with Flacco, does that change what you do in the draft or what quarterbacks you get, because they're going to be technically learning behind him. I don't see Flacco as anybody who has interest in being a mentor. He said this before. He doesn't want to be a mentor. That being said, do I think Milroe is more teachable than Sanders? That is impossible to determine, right? Sanders is somebody who has demonstrated that he's very coachable. Same thing with Jalen Milroe. The question is, which problems would you rather try to solve? The problems that Jalen Milroe has for the reward that it could offer you, or the problems that Shedeur Sanders has for the reward that it can offer you, right? You got to just kind of assume they both are very coachable, because at this point, they've both shown that they are very coachable. The next one comes from Bryce Holt, who says, Q, I remember you were sort of out on Milroe after the Senior Bowl. What changed your mind? Love the content. Yeah, so this is something where during the draft process, I go up and down, and then I finally settle at a place when I feel like I finally got enough information, right? So, what I say in March, what I say in January, what I say in December, it's going to fluctuate until we get to about mid to early April, where I say to myself, I've watched enough games, I've seen enough, I've read enough, I've heard enough about these prospects. This is how I feel, right? So when we were there in January with Jalen Milroe, he came off a bad senior bowl and a bad bowl game performance. I had very much a lot of concerns about his pocket presence. Seemed like at times he just didn't have any pocket presence, and that very much concerned me. The hand size stuff concerned me. But what made me feel better about Jalen Milroe as far as the pocket presence goes was the tape. I watched the tape and I realized it's not really Jalen Milroe that's the issue when he gets sacked most of the time. It's usually the protections that they call, or they call a bunch of routes that are 20 yards downfield and he has to wait for them to develop. It wasn't like Jalen was unaware. It was just he was put in a bad situation for a lot of that. So I was like, okay, maybe this observation I had when I was watching Jalen on TV, you put on the all 22, not really there. As far as the Senior Bowl goes, he looked better after the Senior Bowl, right? He had a bad Senior Bowl, but then you hear he's working with Jordan Palmer, and that's part of the process. And then you can see the process get better and better. Looks better at the combine, looks better at the pro day. Okay, so you're working a progress. What I saw at the Senior Bowl can be excused at that point. And then the hand size thing with him. Well, his hands got bigger. Like, they were really small at the Senior Bowl. They were regular sized, over 9 inches at the combine. So not a problem anymore. The tape was more encouraging than I anticipated with Jalen Milroe. The data on his passing is more encouraging than you would think with Jalen Milroe. And that's gotten me to the points where I'm like, okay, I'm actually comfortable with where I think he is as a passer right now to think that he can progress and be an NFL level passer sometime in the near future. So that's why my opinion about Jalen Milroe has evolved over time. It's because the process was evolving along with it. And now that we're in April, we've gotten all the information we've needed. I've watched all the games here. That's how I feel about him. So when I do a film breakdown, especially like in April of a draft prospect, that's me saying, this is how I feel about this player, right? Like, this is how I feel about what they provide as a football player, and being final on that. So when those drop, that's me saying, I'm at the end of my process for this player. This is what I believe this player to be. But thank you for the question, because I do think it's important to clarify that. Jalen says, does the recent signing of Joe Flacco change how the Browns view QB in the draft, in your opinion? Milroe, second to late first, seems to be the favorite currently. And you've spoken about how good of a fit he does. Does a Milroe and Flacco and Pickett quarterback room seem like a good foundation for the former's development and general team success this year? Also, I appreciate the content, Q. All right. Yeah, I think so. I think a room with Milroe, Flacco, and Pickett can be a good foundation because it does buy Jalen Milroe time. You're not going to expect Jalen Milroe to start over Joe Flacco coming out the season, and you're going to expect that Kenny Pickett is going to be the backup for most of the season. So for the first 8 weeks of the year, you'll have Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett. Maybe you have Jalen Milroe active because you want to use him in some packages. Maybe you don't even have him active for the first few weeks of the season. Eventually, you can, in practice, allow Jalen Milroe to compete with Kenny Pickett for the backup role. See how Jalen's doing in scout team, working with him individually, letting him work on his mechanics off to the side, all of these things. And hopefully Jalen Milroe can beat out Kenny Pickett. And if there becomes a problem with Joe Flacco sometime this season, then Jalen Milroe will make his debut. Think that's a good gauntlet to get Jalen Milroe through, and some quarterbacks that, hey, if he can provide more on offense than Kenny Pickett, then he can be out there and be functional in the NFL game, which makes you feel a lot better about putting him out there. So giving him these steps, these manageable mini bosses to beat, right, to get to the starting job, I think is something that can help him become successful in the future. I don't think that Joe Flacco is going to be mentoring him or that Kenny Pickett's going to be mentoring them. They're going to be trying to pay and get their money. But it's not about who's mentoring who. It's more about what are the obstacles for Jalen Milroe and creating some barriers for him to play in making him clear those hurdles in order to get on the field so that he's at a certain point once he does play. Hope that makes sense. Let's go to the next question from Daryl, who says, I still wonder if a trade back wouldn't be better for us. For example, if we dropped back a few spots and picked up Mason Graham and were able to scoop up Mike Green and Shamar Stewart. Well, you think we're going to do that both? I like Abdul Carter, but if you could add him in a nasty DT to align with Hall and Garrett, I like that too. What are your thoughts? I mean, sure, we can make up a trade back scenario that's very favorable to the Cleveland Browns and say that makes more sense than picking a player at 2. But how realistic is that? right? Like it's just too hypothetical for me. If it comes across the Browns front office and they accept a trade where they get a future first and then another first this year to move back a few spots, then so be it. But this is so far fetched. Like the idea that we're going to be able to not only get a first round pick in the top 10 that allows us to get Mason Graham, but also another first round pick that allows us to draft Mike Green or Shamar Stewart. It's like, who's making that trade? You know? And this is my issue with draft trade Twitter and just draft trade people in general. So many of these trades only make sense from the perspective of the team you care about. But everybody else, this shit falls apart once you ask, man, why would they do that? And usually you end up with some kind of weak response about, oh, well, it just takes one team or somebody's going to get desperate. But it's not a real solution or a real trade scenario with actual fundamentals behind it. It's just maybe they might do this. And would you do this if somebody offered it? Sure. If somebody offers something ridiculous, the Browns should take it. But why are we expecting something ridiculous to happen when none of the fundamentals for somebody to make a ridiculous trade up in the draft are there? Now, again, somebody could do it and be irrational, and that's always that happens every once in a while, not discounting the possibility of that. But why are we sitting here acting like it's a given? Right? Like we're like, we should trade back. We don't even know if a trade back that's worthwhile is on the table. And I don't think there is, because what's the market for a trade back? That again, that's my issue with the trade back stuff, is so many people just assume that there's always going to be a trade back. And a lot of times there's not a good trade back available for you. And if you're the Browns, just pick a good player at 2. It's not that difficult, right? Just do that. Biggs on Big says, do you feel Njoku's value to this team is overrated or underrated? I know he seems to have cold streaks, but it seems like a handful of times QB play has been solid. He showed to be very good. Very interesting to see with David Njoku, what he looks like with Joe Flacco back, because that's where he shined recently. Very excited to see that. And I'm excited to see what Joe Flacco and Jerry Jeudy could do together, because, you would think that that's something that Joe could have a lot of success with. My guy Andre Howard says, how long should the Browns wait to grab a running back in the draft? Should they pull the trigger at 33 and grab Hampton and Henderson, Johnson, or wait a couple of rounds, pick up somebody like Devin Neal or Cam Scatterboo? It depends on what the philosophy is there, right? But I tend to think you should wait till the 3rd round, maybe 4th round. If the player makes sense, if Travion Henderson's there at 60 something, then you go take Travion. But if it's a value that makes sense, then go for it, right? If it's not a value that makes a ton of sense, then don't. And that's what the running back depth of this draft class allows you to do, is allows you to take one that makes sense for the spot that you're in. This is not a year to reach for a running back, and there's going to be a value. You're going to get a value proposition at running back at some point in this draft, more than likely. So I want to do 33 because that feels like a little high for some of the players that you mentioned. But, if they trade back at 33, or if they make some moves around the edges, or if they find somebody there at 67, then yeah, the Browns should attack it. I think you can get a plus level starter in the 3rd or 4th round of this draft class in the running back position for sure. Tracy says, what do you think the Browns' possibility of trading next year's 1st round pick to grab a quarterback this year is? I wouldn't say very high. If you're not willing to take a quarterback at 2, you better not be willing to trade a 1st round pick next year for one, right? Like, I just don't see how those two things can make sense in my mind. Is that you don't want to take a quarterback at 2 because you don't believe in any of these quarterbacks at 2, which I agree with, right? I'm not quarterback at 2 at all. But then to also say, yeah, we don't want to take a quarterback at 2, but we will trade our 1st round pick next year for a quarterback. In a year, we're like, hey, let's be real. We don't know what the Browns pick going to be next year. We could have the 20th pick next year, the 15th. We could have the 5th pick next year. It could be anything. I mean, we talking about starting Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco. Let's be real about what that could mean, right? Usually that doesn't mean great things for your draft position. So, well, that does mean great things for your draft position. It doesn't mean great things for your win-loss record. So, absolutely not. I would say 0 is the possibility for something like that. But I do appreciate the question. And I appreciate the question of everybody who dropped one in the question prompt. Make sure you're subscribed and notified so you can get the question prompt when I do drop it, usually on a Thursday, sometimes on a Friday. But y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.